My son left me $50. His ex showed up with a child after 10 years to take it, but I know everything. The morning of Ethan's funeral was colder than any winter I had ever known. My hands trembled as I clutched the sealed envelope he left for me, the one he said to open only after his death. My son was gone, they said, in a car accident instant, merciful. But there was nothing merciful about burying your only child. I sat in the front row of the church, surrounded by whispers that died the moment I lifted my head. I wasn't crying anymore. I had gone beyond tears. When the priest began to speak, the heavy wooden doors creaked open. He paused, startled. I turned, and there she was. Lena, dressed in black silk, face painted with that same polished deceit I had seen the day she left Ethan. She walked down the aisle like it was a runway, heels clicking on the marble floor, a small boy clinging to her hand. The congregation began to murmur, the kind of low, uncertain sound that fills a room when decency meets audacity. She didn't wait for the priest to finish. "I can't stand here and listen to lies," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice through the hymn. "You talk about Ethan like he was some saint, but what about his son?" She yanked the boy closer. "This is Ethan's only child, his blood, the one you all chose to forget." Every eye in the room turned toward her. My chest tightened. She was bold, venomous, but perfectly calculated. The kind of performance she always delivered, tears right on cue, a quiver in her voice like she had practiced in front of a mirror. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. Lena stepped closer to the coffin. "He abandoned me when I was pregnant," she said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Left me with nothing, but I forgave him because he gave me this child. Now you," her finger pointed straight at me, "you will not erase him from Ethan's legacy." The priest tried to intervene, asking for calm, but she shook him off with a cruel laugh. "Calm? You think I came here for calm? I came for what belongs to my son. Ethan may be gone, but justice isn't." Her words dripped like poison. I wanted to scream, to tell everyone what kind of woman she really was, the lies, the debts, the way she hollowed my son's spirit until there was nothing left but exhaustion. But I stayed silent. My silence had always unsettled her more than anger. The boy clutched a toy car in his small hand, unaware he was just a prop in his mother's play. He looked around, frightened, and for a brief moment I saw Ethan's eyes in that child's confusion. My heart cracked, but not because of blood. It was pity. Pity for a child who had been taught to serve greed before he could spell love. Lena wiped a perfectly timed tear. "You all want to talk about love and loss," she said bitterly. "But none of you cared when we had nothing. Ethan made millions, and now his family wants to keep it all for themselves, not while I'm still breathing." I rose from my seat, slowly, the envelope still in my hand. The priest's voice faltered. The crowd went silent again. I walked toward her until we stood face to face. Up close, I could sense that same practiced sweetness, false warmth hiding venom. "Lena," I said quietly, "you should leave." She smirked. "Or what? You'll have me thrown out of my husband's funeral?" "He was not your husband when he died." That wiped the smirk clean off her face. For a second, she lost her balance in her own story. Then she straightened. "Paperwork can be wrong," she said coldly. "Lawyers can be challenged. I have proof. And soon, the court will too." I didn't answer. I just looked at her, really looked at the kind of hunger that never ends, the kind that eats its own soul first. She didn't see a grieving mother. She saw an obstacle between herself and $50 million. As the pallbearers began to move the coffin, Lena leaned close enough for only me to hear. "I'll be in touch, Dorothy. For your sake, I hope you're reasonable. I'd hate to drag Ethan's name through the mud." I turned away. "You already did, dear," I whispered. She froze, just for a heartbeat, and I felt her mask slip just a flicker of rage before she hid it behind a trembling lip. When she finally left the church, all I could hear was the echo of her heels fading against the stone floor. I looked down at Ethan's coffin, then at the letter he left for me. On the front, in his handwriting, It said, "For Mom, when silence becomes your weapon." I knew then this was not over. But I had something she would never have again. The truth, and a son who had trusted me to guard it. Ethan brought Lena home once, beautiful, dazzling, and hollow. Her charm filled every room but left it colder. He was blinded by love or loneliness. I was chilled by her smile. 3 months later, they married. His calls turned distant, her laughter loud, his life slowly becoming just another act in her show. It didn't take long for cracks to show. Ethan's voice lost its warmth. He stopped talking about her, started working late, avoided questions. Then, one night, he showed up at my door, face pale, hands shaking, like a man who had seen the inside of a lie. "Mom," he said, "I think she's cheating." He sat at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd bandaged his scraped knees, and told me how she had been coming home late, her perfume changing, her phone always turned upside down. "I asked her," he said, his voice breaking, and she laughed. She told me I was paranoid, that stress was making me crazy. Then, 2 days later, she told me she was pregnant. I wanted to believe Ethan was wrong about her, but I knew that tone, the sound of loving an illusion. Lena faked a pregnancy, demanding money and control. When Ethan quietly tested the truth, the clinic found soda in the strip. "You were supposed to love me enough not to check," she said coldly. Their marriage ended that night. She vanished, no apology, no trace, only debts and the silence of betrayal. Ethan searched for closure but found nothing. In her wake, he was left with a broken heart and the bitter knowledge that love, when built on lies, disappears like smoke. I should have said something then, something stronger than, "It will pass." I thought silence would protect him. I thought letting him heal in his own way was the kindest thing I could do. I was wrong. Silence protects no one. It only buries the truth deep enough for it to come back stronger. Months passed. Ethan rebuilt himself brick by brick. He poured everything into his business, worked through nights, started to laugh again. But some part of him remained guarded, like he was waiting for a ghost to reappear. 2 years after the divorce, we had dinner together. He seemed peaceful, older somehow, but when I mentioned Lena's name, even casually, his jaw tightened. "She'll be back one day," he said quietly. "Not for love, but for money. She always comes back for what she thinks she owns." I tried to reassure him, saying that people like her never look back. He shook his head. "Mom, if she ever shows up with a child, don't believe her. Promise me that." I didn't answer right away. It felt like a strange thing to say, dark and distant, but the look in his eyes told me he had seen something I hadn't. He was not afraid of her. He was afraid of what she was capable of. Years passed. Ethan rebuilt his life, stronger, wiser. Sometimes he'd stare at old photos, not with love, but as a warning to himself. Then came the accident. Police said car crash, but he never drove recklessly. I believed them until the funeral, when she returned, dragging her lie through his grave. He had warned me, in glances and silences, that she'd come back with another deception. Now I know. Guilt isn't the heaviest burden a mother's silence is, because when truth knocks and you don't speak, the lie walks right through the church doors, wearing perfume and crocodile tears. 1 week after Ethan's funeral, I woke to the sound of the mail slot clattering. A thick envelope slid across the floor, stamped by a law firm I didn't recognize. I tore it open at the kitchen table, my coffee turning cold beside me. The letter began politely, the way wolves smile before they bite. "Dear Mrs. Miller," it read, "I represent Miss Lena Crawford, widow of the late Ethan Miller, regarding the estate valued at approximately $50 million. Widow, the word burned. They claimed her son, the minor child born of her marriage to Mr. Miller, was entitled to 50% of the inheritance, $25 million in cash, assets, and property. Attached was a copy of a birth certificate. My son's name was right there, printed under father, Ethan James Miller. I sat there for a long time, staring at that piece of paper, my pulse drumming in my ears. The handwriting on the signature line didn't even look like Ethan's, but I knew what this meant. She was coming after him again, even from beyond his grave. I could almost hear her voice, dripping with that sickly sweetness she used when she wanted something. It's not about money, it's about fairness. I folded the papers neatly, slipped them back into the envelope, and placed them on the counter. For the first time in years, I felt anger, not the kind that explodes, but the kind that hardens, quiet and precise. The next day, the phone rang. Her voice was exactly as I remembered it, too calm, too deliberate. "Dorothy," she said, "I assume you've received the documents. I don't want this to get ugly. You and I can settle this quietly, woman to woman." "There's nothing to settle," I replied. "Oh, there's plenty," she said. "That letter you're holding is just the beginning. If you make this difficult, I'll go to the press. How do you think it'll look when they find out your family has been hiding a child, cutting him out of his rightful inheritance? The great Dorothy Miller, living off her dead son's fortune while his child starves? I can already see the headlines." I didn't answer. I let her fill the silence with her poison until she hung up, frustrated that she couldn't get a rise out of me. She always hated my silence. That afternoon, I called a private investigator, a man named Mark Lawson, and within an hour, I had an appointment. But when I arrived at his office, I found out Mark was no longer there. There was something steady in her gaze, the kind of strength you only earn after surviving betrayal yourself. In his place stood a young woman, early 30s, sharp eyes, posture like steel. "He retired," she said. "My name's Ava Turner. I took over the agency last year." There was something about her that made me trust her instantly. Maybe it was the way she didn't look away when I said Lena's name. "You've dealt with her before," I said. Ava nodded slowly. "Not directly, but I know her type. Con artist, manipulator, opportunist. I was one of their victims once." She didn't elaborate, but the edge in her voice told me enough. I handed her the birth certificate, the letter, and a copy of Ethan's will. "Find out everything you can," I said. "And Ava, don't underestimate her. Lena doesn't bluff." Over the next few days, the phone calls continued. Lena's tone shifted from charming to threatening. She claimed she had bank transfers, photos, and witnesses who could prove Ethan supported her child financially. "You think I can't make people talk?" she sneered in one voicemail. "Everyone has a price, Dorothy." I saved every message, every letter. Ava taught me to keep a record. "Predators like her trip over their own lies eventually," she said. "We just need to show the pattern." 3 days later, Ava called with the first piece of good news. "The birth certificate is a forgery," she said. "The hospital listed doesn't even exist under that name anymore. The stamp's a digital overlay, and the attending physician on the record died 6 years before that supposed birth." I let out a long breath. I didn't realize I'd been holding, so she forged everything. She's careful, though. The forger she used is a pro, tied to international cases. I'll need time to trace her connections. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, staring at the streetlight outside, thinking of Ethan's car, the one they said spun out of control on an empty road. I remembered how he always checked his tires before every trip, even for short drives. He wasn't careless. He never was. The next morning, I called the insurance company to ask about the car. The man on the phone told me it had already been towed to a repair lot for evaluation. He said it was standard procedure before closing the claim. But something in his tone, that hesitation before answering, made my stomach twist. "Evaluation for what?" I asked. "Brake system analysis," he said. "It's routine." "Who requested it?" It says here, Mrs. Miller, the request came from your daughter-in-law." "My what?" "Your daughter-in-law. Miss Lena Crawford." The room tilted. I gripped the counter to steady myself. That woman had touched Ethan's car after his death, requested it be moved under her name, before I even buried my son. After the call, I rang Ava immediately. "She moved the car," I said. "She's trying to bury something." "Then we dig," Ava replied. "I'll get a mechanic I trust to inspect it, quietly." For the next week, I watched the world move as if through fog. Lena's lawyer sent follow-up letters, each more aggressive than the last. She wanted a settlement meeting. She wanted to avoid the ugliness of court. She wanted me to know she wasn't afraid to expose the truth. But she had no idea I was already uncovering the real one. One evening, as I sorted through Ethan's papers, I found an invoice from a small auto shop dated 2 days before his accident. It listed a brake inspection complete, no issues found. Ethan had been planning a business trip to Chicago. He was careful enough to get a checkup. That meant whatever happened after wasn't random. When Ava called again 2 days later, her voice was tight. "Dorothy, I just got back from the garage where the car was taken. You were right. The brake line didn't just fail, it was cut clean, deliberate. No corrosion, no wear. Someone knew what they were doing." My breath caught. "Can you prove it?" "I have photos, and I've already sent a report to a contact at the state police. But Dorothy, there's something else. Whoever arranged the towing used a forged authorization form. The signature was yours. Mine. She had signed my name." I hung up and stared at Ethan's picture on the mantel. His eyes, his steady smile, they no longer looked peaceful. They looked like a man trying to warn me even from beyond. Lena wasn't just after money. She had killed him to get it. That night, for the first time in years, I prayed not for forgiveness, but for strength. Because this wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about justice. And justice, I promised my son, would not die with him. The following week felt endless. Every hour stretched thin with waiting, with anger turning quietly into resolve. Ava moved fast. Within a week, she had everything set up. The child had been brought to a mediation meeting arranged by Lena's lawyer, a stunt meant to make her case look legitimate. While Lena argued over technicalities, the boy dozed off in the waiting room. Ava collected a tissue he had used, sealed it in a plastic bag, and sent it to a private DNA lab she trusted. We didn't speak of it for 3 days. The silence between us felt like a held breath. When the results arrived, Ava didn't email or call. She drove straight to my house, face pale, envelope in hand. She sat across from me and said, "It's not even close, Dorothy. The DNA doesn't match. He's not Ethan's child." I didn't feel triumph, just a hollow ache. I thought of that little boy clutching his toy car at the funeral, his eyes searching for something familiar in strangers' faces. He was innocent, a pawn in a game his mother played too well. But the confirmation gave me something solid, something real. The web of lies was breaking thread by thread. I asked Ava if we could take it to the police, but she advised patience. "We'll give them more than DNA. We'll give them motive and proof." While the lab processed the results, Ava had quietly requested an official report from the state's Accident Investigation Unit. The insurance company's inspection had looked sloppy, she said. Too quick, too neat. I didn't expect much. Ethan had been gone for weeks, but when the report arrived, the first line made my hands shake. Brake system irregularity detected, possible manual interference. I read it twice, then again. The words blurred, but the meaning was sharp enough to cut through the fog I'd been living in. Manual interference. Not wear. Not corrosion. Someone had reached under my son's car and taken his life with their bare hands. Ava took the papers to a contact in the police department, someone who still believed in quiet justice. 2 days later, he called back. "Mrs. Miller," he said. The car's brake lines were severed cleanly with a cutting tool. Whoever did this knew where to cut to make it look like a mechanical failure. I asked him if there was any footage, any clue who might have done it. He hesitated. "There's something else. One of your neighbors mentioned your son had installed security cameras a few years ago. The system's old, but we managed to retrieve some data. The footage was grainy, but I knew that silhouette, graceful, deliberate, deadly. A woman entered Ethan's garage at 11:42 p.m., 48 hours before the crash. She stayed 8 minutes, leaving with something metal in her hand. The tilt of her head, it was Lena. I watched the clip until certainty burned away grief. Ethan hadn't died by chance. He'd been erased by the same woman who once whispered love. Alone in the dark, I saw it clearly. The forged papers, the lawsuit, her demand to move his car. Every move had been planned. She hadn't come for closure, she'd come to finish what she started. Ava called late that evening. "Dorothy," she said carefully, "we can take this to the police, but I need to warn you, she'll fight. She'll twist every truth, buy every story. You ready for that?" I looked at Ethan's photo on the mantel. I've been ready since the day I buried him. The next morning, we submitted the evidence package, the DNA report, the brake line analysis, the video footage, and copies of Lena's forged documents. The detective who met us didn't say much at first. He flipped through the files slowly, occasionally glancing at me. Finally, he said, "This is enough to open a homicide investigation." Homicide. The word echoed in my head like a verdict. It was the confirmation of everything my heart already knew. That evening, I received another call, this time from Lena's lawyer. His tone was still polite, but there was something uneasy behind it. "Mrs. Miller, my client wants to extend a final offer. If you agree to a private settlement, she'll drop the custody claim and the public accusations. 20 million, wired directly." I almost laughed. "Tell your client I don't negotiate with murderers." Then I hung up. 2 days later, the detective sent enhanced footage, her face turned toward the light, unmistakable. Lena, the same lips that lied at his funeral. Ethan hadn't crashed, he'd been murdered. And now, his killer wanted his fortune too. But she misjudged me. She mistook grief for weakness, not knowing it had burned everything soft inside me. What remained was steel. When police called her for questioning, I didn't tremble. My silence had ended. I was no longer a grieving mother. I was a witness, a blade sharpened by loss, ready to speak the truth aloud. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock, the kind that isn't urgent, but steady, almost hesitant. I opened the door to see a young woman standing there, clutching an envelope against her chest, as though it was the only thing holding her together. Her coat was too thin for the Michigan cold, her face pale but calm. "Mrs. Miller?" she asked softly. Her voice trembled. "My name is Claire." Something in her eyes, grief mixed with courage, made me step aside before I even thought to ask why she was there. She entered quietly, looking around the living room like she'd been there before, like she knew this place mattered to someone she loved. "I'm sorry to come unannounced," she said, sitting on the edge of the couch. "I've tried calling your son for months. After December, all my messages came back undelivered. Then I saw the news. I didn't even know he was gone." Her words sank like stones. I sat across from her, my hands clasped in my lap. "How did you know, Ethan?" She hesitated, then opened the envelope and handed me a folded photo. It was Ethan, smiling in a park I didn't recognize, his arm around her. He looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way I hadn't seen in years. "We met last summer," she said. "He came into the cafe where I work. At first, I didn't know who he was. He never talked about his company or money. He just ordered coffee, every morning, always the same way. He said routine calmed him." She smiled faintly, then blinked back tears. It wasn't until later that I learned what he'd been through. He told me about his marriage, about the lies. He said he was finally learning to trust again. I studied her face, searching for deceit and finding none. There was something honest in her sorrow, something Lena had never been capable of. "He loved you," I said quietly. Claire's lips trembled. "We were planning a future, Mrs. Miller. We even picked a name for the baby." I froze. "The baby?" She nodded and placed a trembling hand on her stomach. "I'm 4 months pregnant. Ethan knew before." She swallowed hard. "Before the accident, he was so happy. He said he'd tell you himself after he got back from that trip." My heart thudded in my chest. Ethan had been expecting a child, his real child, and never told me. Or maybe he tried. Maybe he never had the chance. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out another envelope, sealed with Ethan's handwriting. "He told me that if anything ever happened to him, I should bring this to you. He said you'd know what to do." My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter and a USB drive. The letter began with Ethan's usual precision dates, instructions, his clean script unmistakable. But by the second paragraph, the tone shifted. "Mom," it began, "if you're reading this, it means something's gone wrong. Please don't believe anything Lena says. She's been contacting me again, emails, calls from blocked numbers, messages left at the office. I've reported it, but she's unpredictable. She said things I can't ignore." I could almost hear his voice as I read on. "I've made arrangements to protect what matters most, Claire. And our son. Yes, Mom, I'm going to be a father again. I wish you could meet her sooner. She's the kind of woman I thought didn't exist anymore. She knows everything about Lena, about the divorce, about how it broke me. And she stayed. If something happens to me, promise me you'll protect her and protect our child. Don't let Lena near them. She's dangerous." My throat tightened. Tears blurred the ink on the page. Ethan had known. He'd felt the threat closing in. "I've also left a video file," the letter continued. "Watch it with Claire. It'll explain what I couldn't put in writing." I looked up at Claire, who was crying silently now. "He sent me one too," she whispered. "But I never got it. Someone blocked my emails, my messages, everything. I thought he'd changed his mind until I saw the news of his death. And then I knew something was wrong." We plugged the USB into my laptop. The screen flickered, and then Ethan appeared alive, real, smiling that tired but hopeful smile I knew so well. He was sitting in his study, papers scattered behind him, the same lamp glowing softly in the corner. "Hi, Mom," he began. His voice cracked, but he steadied himself. "If you're seeing this, I guess my instincts were right. I don't want you to panic. Just listen." He paused, looking down for a moment before continuing. "You always said the past has a way of finding us. Well, Lena found me again. She's been asking questions about my will, about the business. She says she wants closure, but I can see it in her eyes. She wants control. I don't trust her, Mom. I think she's planning something." He took a deep breath. "If anything happens to me, don't believe the first story they tell you. Look closer. And please, take care of Claire. She's carrying our son. I want him to grow up knowing what love feels like, not lies, not fear, just love." The video ended abruptly, the screen fading to black. I sat there frozen, unable to speak, as Claire's sobs filled the room. I reached over, took her hand, and squeezed it tight. "He was protecting you," I said softly. "He was protecting both of you." She nodded through tears. "He said you were the only one he trusted. He told me that if something ever happened, I should find you because you'd know what to do." I couldn't stop the tears anymore. I pulled her into my arms, and for a moment, the world fell quiet. Two women bound by the same loss, the same man, the same love that Lena had tried to destroy. When we finally let go, Claire wiped her face and looked at me with a strength that startled me. "What will you do now?" she asked. I looked toward Ethan's photo on the mantel and then back at her. "What I should have done a long time ago," I said. "Finish what he started." That night, I reread Ethan's letter until every word etched itself into my heart. He had left no doubt, no hesitation. He knew who Lena was, what she was capable of, and who he wanted to carry his legacy forward. The next morning, I called Ava. "We're not just fighting for justice anymore," I told her. "We're fighting for his son." Because for the first time, I had proof not just of Lena's lies, but of Ethan's truth. And that truth had a heartbeat, growing inside the woman who now sat in my kitchen, sipping tea with trembling hands and the courage of someone who had lost everything except hope. When I looked at her, I didn't just see Ethan's love. I saw my grandson's future. And I swore to both of them that no one, not Lena, not her forged papers, not her poisoned words, would take that future away. The courthouse smelled of polished wood and fear. Reporters lined the hallway, cameras flashing as I walked in beside Ava and Claire. I had worn Ethan's favorite scarf, the one he used to borrow on cold mornings, because it felt like armor. Lena stood at the other end of the corridor, draped in black again, pretending to mourn. She even held the child's hand for effect. The boy looked lost, frightened. She looked radiant. Her lawyer's slick hair, smug smile greeted us like it was a game. "Let's make this painless," Mrs. Miller, he said. We all know the truth will come out today. Yes, I answered quietly. It will. The hearing began at 9 a.m. Sharp. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and the kind of eyes that saw through performance, called the court to order. Lena sat at the plaintiff's table, head bowed, voice trembling as she began her testimony. Your Honor, she said, my son deserves his father's legacy. Ethan Miller abandoned us, but I forgive him. I only ask that my child receives what is rightfully his. It was a perfect performance. Tears, hesitation, even a shaky hand dabbing at her eyes. Her lawyer then presented the evidence, the birth certificate, photos of Ethan holding a baby I had never seen, and fake messages, she claimed, were from my son promising to take care of them. When our turn came, Ava stood, calm, composed, deadly. Your Honor, she began, we intend to prove that this case is not about inheritance, but about deception, forgery, and murder. The courtroom stilled. Even Lena's lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Ava laid out the evidence piece by piece. First, the DNA report. This child, whom Miss Crawford claims is Mr. Miller's son, is not biologically related to him. She handed the report to the judge, who read silently, her eyebrows rising slightly. Then came the birth certificate. Ava projected a magnified version onto the courtroom screen. This document contains a hospital seal from an institution that closed 5 years before the listed birth date. The attending physician listed here, Dr. Harold Kingsley, passed away in 2011. She let the silence linger before continuing. Miss Crawford's so-called evidence was manufactured. Lena's lawyer objected, but the judge waved him off. Next came the footage. The lights dimmed as the video played, grainy but undeniable. A hooded figure entering Ethan's garage, crouching near the car, leaving after 8 minutes, then a still frame, enhanced. Lena's profile illuminated by the security light, her features caught in the split second she looked up. Lena went pale. Her lawyer rose again, shouting about privacy, doctored footage, illegal recordings. But then Ava played the audio recording, the one that sealed everything. The voice was unmistakably Lena's, laughing softly. Just one DNA test, that's all it takes. Once we prove he's Ethan's, 25 million is ours. And if anyone gets in the way, I'll handle it the same way I handled him. The room fell silent. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Lena froze, eyes darting wildly between her lawyer and the judge. The judge's tone hardened. Miss Crawford, are you suggesting you handled Mr. Miller? Explain what that means. Lena's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her lawyer whispered frantically to her, but the damage was done. Ava wasn't finished. Your Honor, she said, further investigation reveals Miss Crawford is not merely a grieving widow. She is a participant in an organized fraud network operating across state lines and multiple countries. Their method is consistent. Target wealthy men, fabricate relationships, produce falsified birth certificates, and extort settlements. She produced documents, bank transfers, fake IDs, even an FBI report connecting Lena to similar scams in Florida and Canada. In each case, when their victims resisted, the accidents began. Mechanical failures, fires, disappearances. The prosecutor, who had been quietly observing, rose to address the court. Your Honor, the state formally requests the inclusion of homicide and conspiracy charges. Evidence suggests that Miss Crawford directly tampered with Mr. Miller's vehicle 2 days before his death. Lena broke then. She lunged to her feet, shouting, "You can't prove anything. He was drunk. He wanted to die." The judge's gavel slammed. Enough. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound could be. After a recess, the verdict came swift and final. The judge's voice was calm, almost sorrowful. This court finds Miss Lena Crawford guilty of fraud, forgery, extortion, and conspiracy to commit murder. Considering the evidence of premeditation and the organized nature of her crimes, she is sentenced to 20 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. A gasp ran through the courtroom. Lena turned to me, eyes blazing with hatred. "You think you've won, old woman?" she hissed. "You don't even know who you're dealing with." I met her gaze steadily. "I know exactly who you are, Lena. And now, so does the world." The judge continued. "All co-conspirators identified in the investigation will be prosecuted under federal law. The minor child, found to be unrelated to the Miller family, will be placed under state protection and provided with counseling and care." Lena screamed as the guards took her away, shouting curses that echoed down the corridor. But I didn't watch her go. My eyes were on the little boy sitting quietly with a social worker at the back of the room, holding a stuffed bear too tightly. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at anyone. He was just a child, another life twisted by the greed of the woman who birthed him. When the session ended, Claire squeezed my hand. Her belly had grown, and when I looked at it, I felt both the ache of loss and the beginning of something new. Outside the courthouse, the reporters swarmed. I said only one sentence before walking away. "Justice doesn't bring back the dead, but it stops the living from killing again." The wind was sharp as we stepped into the street, but for the first time since Ethan's death, I could breathe. The truth was out. The lies were buried, and Lena, her empire of deceit, was finally gone. The first cry came just after dawn. It was raw, fierce, and alive, the sound of everything I had lost returning in the shape of something new. I stood frozen at the hospital doorway as the nurse smiled and said, "It's a boy." Claire lay on the bed, pale but radiant, tears slipping down her cheeks. Her hands trembled when they placed the baby in her arms. "His name is Elijah," she whispered. "Ethan chose it." For a moment, I couldn't move. My feet felt heavy, as if my body understood before my mind did. My grandson was here. The living proof that love could outlast death, that Ethan's story wasn't finished after all. When Claire looked up at me, her voice cracked. "Do you want to hold him?" I didn't answer. I simply nodded and extended my arms. She placed the tiny bundle in my hands, warm, fragile, impossibly light. I had forgotten what a heartbeat felt like so close to my own. Elijah opened his eyes, deep gray like his father's, and blinked up at me. The air left my lungs. For a long time, I couldn't speak. I traced the small curve of his cheek, the same gentle dimple Ethan had when he smiled. "My God," I whispered. "He's him. He's my boy." Claire smiled weakly. "He has your calm," she said, "and his father's stubbornness already." I laughed, and the sound startled me. Laughter had become a stranger in my house. But it felt good, like sunlight through cracks in old glass. Then the tears came, slow at first, then unstoppable. I held Elijah close, my tears falling onto his blanket. "My son," I murmured, voice shaking. "Your father always loved me. Even when he was gone, even when I didn't understand how to save him, he loved me." Claire's hand rested gently on my arm. "He loved you more than you knew, Dorothy. He talked about you all the time, said you were the strongest person he'd ever met." I pressed my lips to Elijah's forehead and closed my eyes. The scent of baby powder, of warmth, of life, it was the scent of forgiveness. For the first time since Ethan's death, I didn't feel like a mother mourning her son. I felt like a grandmother welcoming a promise. Over the following weeks, the house filled again with sound. The soft hum of lullabies, the clatter of dishes, the tiny wails that broke the night and made us laugh through exhaustion. Claire moved into the guest room without much discussion. We both knew we needed each other, two women carrying the same love in different ways. I would wake before dawn, make coffee, and watch the sunrise from the porch. Elijah bundled in my arms. He'd blink up at the light, his tiny fingers curling around mine, and I'd whisper stories about his father, about the way he used to fix everything in the house just to prove he could, about the day he built his first business from nothing, about the way he'd stand up for people who couldn't stand for themselves. One morning, I caught my reflection in the window, gray hair, tired eyes, and a baby on my chest. For the first time in years, I didn't see loneliness. I saw legacy. When Elijah turned 2 months old, I began working with Ava and Claire on something Ethan would have believed in: a foundation. We called it the Ethan Hope Fund. Its mission was simple: to support women who had been deceived, abandoned, or manipulated women who had been told to endure silence instead of seek justice. The fund started small, with part of Ethan's estate and donations from the people who had followed our case. Within months, it grew into something larger than any of us expected. There were calls from other states, letters from women who said they finally felt seen. Every story hurt to read, but it also healed something inside me. Ethan always said pain only has meaning if it builds something. I told Claire one evening as we reviewed applications. He was right. This is what he wanted his name to stand for. Claire smiled. She was stronger now, her laughter freer, her eyes no longer shadowed by grief. He'd be proud of you, she said. Of both of us. We became a family, not the kind defined by perfection, but by truth. We celebrated Elijah's milestones together. His first laugh, his first steps, his first time calling me Nana. Each sound, each smile, was another stitch closing the wound Lena had left. Sometimes, late at night, I'd stand by Elijah's crib, watching him sleep. The moonlight touched his face the way it once touched Ethan's, soft and golden. I'd whisper the same words every time, like a prayer. You were loved, my son, and you gave me back everything love can be. When Elijah turned 6 months, we held a small ceremony for the Foundation's first anniversary. Reporters came again, this time not for tragedy but for hope. I stood on the same courthouse steps where justice had been served months before, holding Elijah in my arms as the cameras flashed. Pain can destroy, I said into the microphone, but it can also build. My son's life and his death taught me both. This foundation isn't about revenge or pity. It's about rebirth, about turning betrayal into compassion and grief into protection. The crowd applauded. Claire wiped her eyes and mouthed, "He'd be so proud." Later that evening, after everyone had gone, I sat in the quiet office of the foundation. Elijah was asleep in his stroller beside me. The city lights glowed outside the window, and I found myself whispering to the air, "You see, Ethan, I kept my promise. I protected them. I protected your legacy." Then I looked at Elijah and smiled. He stirred slightly, his small hand reaching for mine even in sleep. "Your father always loved me," I said softly, the words trembling but true. "And now, through you, I can love him all over again." That night, as I turned off the lights and closed the office door, I realized something simple and undeniable. The story wasn't about loss anymore. It was about what we rebuild from it, a family born not from perfection, but from truth, love, and the kind of strength that refuses to die. The snow had been falling since dawn, soft and slow, blanketing the world in silence. I sat in my armchair by the window, a wool blanket across my knees, watching Elijah through the glass as he built crooked snowmen in the yard. His laughter floated faintly through the cold, bright, untamed, alive. Claire was in the kitchen, humming while she made tea. Sometimes, when she moved just right, I could see a flicker of Ethan in her, the calm focus, the way she tilted her head when she listened. It was strange how grief, given time, could turn into something tender. The living room was filled with warmth now, not because of the fire, but because it was ours again. No lawyers, no reporters, no whispers about death or scandal, just the sound of a child discovering joy. I looked around at the photos on the mantel. Ethan holding a fishing rod, his boyish grin frozen in time. A picture of Claire at the Foundation's first event, standing in front of a banner that read, "The Ethan Hope Fund, from pain to purpose." And in the center, one new photo, Claire, Elijah, and me. 3 survivors of one man's love, one woman's deceit, and the truth that refused to die. Sometimes people ask me how I kept going. I tell them the truth. I didn't. The truth kept me. When people look at old women, they see fragility, hands that tremble, eyes that forget. What they don't see is the memory that never fades, the silence that stores every word ever said in anger or love. When people think a grandmother is harmless, they forget we've already buried everything that once could hurt us. We've seen betrayal dressed as affection. We've learned that justice doesn't shout, it waits, it watches, and when the time is right, it speaks softly. But every word lands like thunder. I sipped my tea and whispered to the window, "Ethan, we're okay now. She can't touch us anymore." Elijah looked up, his cheeks flushed pink, and waved at me. I waved back. His mittened hand was small, but his presence filled the yard like sunlight breaking through snow clouds. "When people think old women just ramble," I murmured, half to myself, "they don't see that we remember. And the truth doesn't grow old with us. It lives, quietly, until the day it needs to be spoken." Claire joined me on the couch, holding 2 steaming mugs. "He's so much like him," she said softly. "Yes," I nodded, "but this time he'll grow up knowing he's safe." She smiled, and for a long while we said nothing. The snow kept falling, the fire crackled, and Elijah's laughter blended with the winter wind. When she left to check on him, I stayed where I was, staring at the photo on the mantel again. My hand brushed across Ethan's face, then Claire's, then little Elijah's. I thought of everything we'd survived, the lies, the loss, the loneliness, and how, somehow, we were still here. The world outside was quiet, but not silent. Somewhere under the sound of snow on glass, I could still hear Ethan's voice, calm, certain, alive in every breath of his son. And I realized that justice isn't a shout in the courtroom. It's this: a quiet morning, a safe child, and the memory of a man who will never truly be gone. I closed my eyes and whispered, "My son always loved his mother." Outside, Elijah laughed again, and the sound carried through the house like an answer, soft, perfect, eternal. And that, my dear listeners, is where my story ends, not in anger, not in fire, but in peace. Because sometimes, justice doesn't roar, it whispers. It breathes through the generations who survive to tell the truth out loud. Ethan's gone, yes, but his love remains in every heartbeat of that little boy playing in the snow, in every cup of tea shared between 2 women who chose compassion over vengeance, and in every quiet night when I sit by the fire knowing the truth finally found its voice. If you've walked with me through this story, through loss, through deceit, through the long road to justice, then you already know, silence isn't weakness. It's the sound before the truth speaks. If you felt something in your heart tonight, don't let it fade. Hit that subscribe button to stay with me, here at Grandma True Stories, where the quietest voices finally get to be heard. Because wisdom doesn't shout, my loves, it remembers. And when a grandma speaks, the world listens.